Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of SteamLUG Cast. Today is the 21st of March as we record this. My name is Cheese, and with me I have John.
Hello, peeps.
And DerRidda.
Hello.
How are you guys?
Missing Swordfisher.
Hey, what's that about?
Yeah.
Otherwise, great.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you, John.
You're all good, DerRidda.
I have been away as well.
Why have you been away, Cheese?
Yes, tell us about it.
I have been mad busy. We did took Tool Off Beast to a convention, and that always requires many sleepless nights of sewing and making stuff. And also during Double Fine's Amnesia Fortnight, as I may have mentioned in the last cast I was on, some of the community got together and decided to create one of the pitches that was unsuccessful in the voting process. And we targeted Linux with that. We used Unity as an engine, kind of did that in Wine for me, but we had many other contributors on other platforms, and that was pretty exciting. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've had time for.
Well, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, and you made news.
Oh, it's good to be back.
You're on RPS or something?
Oh yeah, and Eurogamer and PC Gamer and whole stack. I will hunt down the thread, and people can check them out for themselves.
So yeah, but it seems like you had some time to play some games still. So, what have you been playing?
In the last week, I managed to find some time to sit down, and I've been playing the new Hand of Fate Alpha, which is a crowdfunded game that we mentioned a couple of times. John Warner, who joined us for an earlier SteamLUG Cast episode to talk about The Fall, has just recently put out a native Linux alpha for that game, and I've been helping him through a couple of minor teething issues, font support and that sort of thing, for the Linux version, but that is heaps more solid than it was in Wine and heaps more enjoyable. It's really great to be able to see that game come together. I found time to play a couple of Spelunky daily challenges, which is cool. Yesterday I got up to 3rd level of the Ice Caves without dying, which was sweet.
Have you managed to finish that game at all?
Not yet. I am still learning. But I've unlocked the Ice Cave shortcut, so I kind of have played enough of the game to do that as well. Just kind of use the shortcuts to have a bit of a practice game before I do the daily challenge. I don't have a lot of time to really play it much. But I also played some Faster Than Light, some Portal 2, Forced with you guys. Or, no, you and Namoda. And we're doing Broken Age for Game Club at the moment, which we might mention again later. And yesterday I fired up the Reminiscence engine and played a whole bunch of Flashback, which is a game that I love very, very much. What about you, John? What have you been playing?
Today I managed to get some time to play The Plan.
What did you think of that?
It's very close to not being a game, but it's still a game. You play as a fly, you float around a bit, you get blown around by some wind, some leaves, and yes, it's quite short. It's free on Steam. You can play it for a few minutes. You might like it. It's got some nice music in it. Typewriter, an informative sort of Wikipedia tutorial of the history of fonts. It's nice. Yeah,
It looked like a platformer.
it is a platformer, but you navigate the platforms collecting glyphs, and it unlocks sort of pages from Gutenberg and Garamond and all these other people who've got a history with fonts. It's quite good. I dropped in to Cargo Commander, and I'm really impressed with that game. I recommend anyone who's unsure about it to pick it up. And as Cheese said, I played some Forced with him. So, what have you been playing, DerRidda?
So yeah, but I have not been playing all that much this week. A bit busy quoting other things. But I've been playing some Dota 2, some Portal 2, a bit of it with Cheese until I crashed. And also one very good single-player community test chamber. It's called 12 Angry Tests. It's a series of a small story campaign. It even has like a boss fight at the end. If you want to play a really good custom campaign, you should totally check out 12 Angry Tests. Yeah, and after all the hype or non-hype around the new Thief game, I have played the original a bit. And I must say, it's still a good game, but it is key and shows its age a lot. Sometimes the AI just decides to randomly derp out and see you through a wall or not you when you're right in front of it. The controls really show they hadn't perfectly figured out first-person controls back then, but it's still a good game.
It is still heaps of fun, and Thief Gold is a little bit more polished than the original release did as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I do not know. That's actually the first time I've played it. So, yeah, that was all I have been playing this week. Not a lot.
Have you tried the new Thief game? Not that it's on Linux.
No, I really have no interest in that. It seems like it wants to rip off Dishonored, and I was already a bit disappointed with Dishonored. So, maybe if it's in the bargain bin some down the line, but not at the moment, though.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I really love Thief and Thief 2, and I kind of find it very difficult to get excited or have faith in anything after the mess that Thief 3 was.
We've had such time since the previous games that developers have sort of learnt that they can't badly remake games. We've had a really decent amount of tolerable remakes recently, haven't we? Tomb Raider, Thief,
Syndicate!
Deus Ex.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I haven't played Deus Ex or Tomb Raider, so I don't know.
I've heard that Syndicate's a good game. It just probably shouldn't have been called Syndicate, whereas these other games are, thematically very similar. And it does sound like Thief's a pretty reasonable game, just not as brilliant as the originals.
Maybe. Like I said, I haven't played it. I just kind of don't want to get worked up about it and get disappointed.
I don't want to be too negative, because it may be that these newer games are the ones that get ported to our platform, and, I'm going to be championing them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our community events.
We played Forced, and then we didn't play Forced.
No, we didn't. It was a bit sad. Nobody really had Forced except maybe 2 people, and the entire channel was full of people, so we decided to switch it to Synergy instead. And we just pumped out 5 hours of Half-Life 2 single-player campaign in co-op straight, or more even. It was a blast.
How many people did you have in there?
Up to 10.
It was full at one point, yeah.
Wow.
And we just made a boat race and a buggy race out of it and crashed each other off bridges and stuff. It was extremely fun in all its craziness.
I know, I feel doubly sad that I had to miss it.
Aww. I peeled off sort of just as we were getting to the Citadel, because it was getting a bit late. It's definitely good fun. The odd glitch, but you have to accept that in a sort of multiplayer hack. But yeah, really good fun.
And we also had a Left 4 Dead 2 event that weekend.
Yeah, that went really well.
Yes, it was extremely fun. John and I had a bit of a disagreement about in-game banter there, and it turned out he had muted me in Mumble and only figured it out when we were trying to play Dota 2, which was the next event. But it was still extremely funny.
Which is kind of funny, because half an hour into the event, people are like, "Can you not hit DerRidda?" And I was like, oh, yes, whoops, I've got it muted. But yeah, Left 4 Dead, really good fun. Dota 2, also good fun.
And we had Natural Selection 2 as well.
Yes.
Which I did get to.
Dota 2 went okay, but Natural Selection still crashes a lot. I mean, there was only half the stuff I thought would be in the new patch, and pretty much everyone that came crashed either at the start or sometime later in the game, at least once.
I didn't. Yay!
So that's a bit of a downer.
But I also left after half an hour.
I have to apologise. I booked that event on the belief that all those patches were going in that update, and I just didn't hear that they hadn't. I had a few crashes.
Still, it was better than when it first launched, I think.
Totally, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And we still had a lot of fun. I mean, we had at least one full map with just SteamLUG community members, and then when it thinned out a bit, we went to a public server where teams were completely stacked to one side, and it was not a lot of fun anymore, because in competitive public games, people refuse to properly balance. It seems like competitive players like easy wins in public games.
Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, it was a rookie server, though. They had a couple of pros, one on either side, teaching people. But
actually, most of the people there were quite pro.
Were they? Didn't seem it when I was playing.
Yeah.
I was on Marines. You were on the other side, weren't you?
Yeah, for some time. The really newbie players have green names still. So if you see some greens around, they are really new and probably don't know what they are doing. But everybody that has a white name should at least know what they are doing.
Hell, I mean, I know what I'm doing, and I'm still a rookie in that game. Yeah, it's good fun. We just have to get more of a community playing that game sort of regularly and bringing new people in. I think that should become a popular event game.
Yeah.
Whenever that might be.
So, as far as upcoming events go, I think we've got a TF2 event after the cast here.
Yeah.
Which should be fun.
We have Killing Floor tomorrow. I hope quite a few people will turn out, because it's been waning recently, and we need to get more people playing that again.
Yeah, I'm going to have to sit that one out, unfortunately.
I might be run for Killing Floor.
Oh, cool. On the 28th, on Friday, we've got Horde. That's a really good, gentle multiplayer game, so you can relax and just chat and enjoy yourself. We have Serious Sam 3 on the 29th.
It's been a while since we've had a Serious Sam event, hey?
Yay, more co-op madness. Are we going to play Jewel of the Nile or the regular campaign again? Because we've played that a lot.
The thing is, the Jewel of the Nile's a bit harder, isn't it? And I don't want to... I think we'll just decide when we get to it, to see what people are up to.
Just go with what people want, yeah.
Yeah.
Because not everyone has the DLC, do they?
Yeah. Maybe we can do some of the other multiplayer modes or something.
As far as other community stuff goes, John, you and DerRidda have been talking about YouTube stuff.
Yes, we have been planning to do it for a while, but just, trying to get things sorted out takes a time. We are going to be mixing down the recordings of the cast and uploading to YouTube as well. We're going to have all the show notes to link to timestamps, so it's going to be the same as listening on the site.
And we can embed them in Steam community news posts as well, I think.
So you added this note about Portal 2?
I did. I want to hear from people who have been using the in-game map editor now that we can do it under Linux. It'd be nice to get a Linux Portal 2 mapping community going. Maybe run a competition if we get enough people who are keen. But just for now, it'd be nice to get people sharing stuff. So a couple of people have posted a few little bits and pieces in there. Just kind of interested to see what people come up with, because aside from those of us running tools in Wine, there certainly haven't really been a lot of opportunities for Linux users to be making Portal 2 maps. But so anyone who's thinking of playing around, hop in there, chat about stuff. Maybe we can start sharing some experience and advice, see where things go.
I would love to make maps, but I don't think my brain's creative enough to actually make puzzles that are interesting.
I think there's a good map and a challenging puzzle are not necessarily the same thing, yeah. And like the 3 maps that I popped in there, I don't feel like any of them are particularly challenging. But I think there's aesthetic issues and pacing issues that are well addressed in those.
I do think Portal 2's got some really good existing co-op maps.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can think of the one where you've got to get those, you've got to get blue gel onto a vertically positioned walkway, and then you bounce up the side of a thing up to the top. That's a really good puzzle, I thought.
Yeah, Cheese and I were playing a map where you were actually not doing any portals, but you had to play a little marble maze where one guy was controlling horizontal tilt and the other guy was controlling vertical tilt.
Oh yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Especially without ping. It was mad. But yeah, so if anybody has stuff to share away. For the Double Fine Game Club, we are currently playing Broken Age, which, as we all know, Adventure Games supports Linux. And tomorrow morning, probably sometime in the past when the archive for this goes up, I will be doing a live interview with Tim Schafer and relaying community questions from the IRC chat. So if anybody is remotely excited by that, feel free to drop in.
So, Steam and Valve news. Dota's had some tweaks to its sound. If you're out of the game when you get a ready up message, it will no longer have hitches. And they are moving from SOX, I think, to A-Play at some point.
Does that at any point have a chance of fixing the outstanding bug that you sometimes just lose all the sound in the middle of the game?
They are looking at it. That's all I know. You can actually get sound debugging information printed out in the game, and it just seems like there are sounds that are persisting when they should have already been removed from the queue, but I don't obviously know if they know how that's triggering. So Valve also pushed some additional repos to GitHub in the last fortnight. They've pushed their Valve OpenGL debugger, which is Vogel.
Oh yeah.
Or Vogel, depending on how you want to say it. They also pushed 2GL, or Toggle, which is their DirectX to OpenGL. It's their transition layer. It's not a be all and end all for doing it, but it's how they've mapped it in their source titles, at least.
It's still really interesting to see this released. It's under an MIT license, isn't it?
Yes, MIT pretty much was just the name ripped out and their own name put in.
Yeah. So, even though it's certainly not an all-purpose solution, there's hopefully some learning there for developers who are working on their own stuff and want to look at what kind of approaches are available without rewriting their entire renderer.
Yeah. But I think out of these two projects, Volcor is probably more interesting.
Absolutely. After all these developers have been complaining about OpenGL debugging, that's supposed to be really poopy, I mean, that should be the solution.
It's poopy because all the tools are lacking, and the only good OpenGL debuggers are on Windows, sadly, at the moment. But yeah, that should really help solidify drivers, make them harder, and hopefully mean that we can get features quicker because they're no longer working around interoperability bugs and the rest. So it's all good.
I did spot in I think it was the latest World Wine News updatey thing, they're doing that again, which is kind of neat. Some wine contributors had looked into Toggle to see whether or not there'd be anything of value for the project there, and it sounds like it's a little bit too narrow to be useful with the sort of stuff that wine does.
Yeah, Ryan, I can't say I really understand it, but from what I've read, you should probably implement Toggle into the actual render engine you are using, and Ryan looks like it needs more of a generic approach that just captures everything that's thrown at it.
Well, one's got to deal with a lot more edge cases and varied implementations and stuff than any one program is likely to need.
And it's also not even a complete DirectX 9 implementation.
Right, and that was a big complaint that I saw, was that apparently none of the stuff that makes DirectX 9 interesting is covered by it, apparently.
Which source title did they say this was from? I forget. Was it Dota?
Yes.
Yeah, commit log says Dota.
Potentially missing the Portal 2 changes they may have. This is the thing, we don't know the strict history of all the different engines, do we?
No.
Because they're not necessarily linearly from each other, they all branch completely differently, so...
Yeah.
It may not be as recent as all their changes for everything, so I don't know.
I imagine that they try and keep at least Dota 2 up to date. It feels like it's the kind of test beddy type thing for most of what's going on.
Yeah, Dota 2 is definitely the busiest game of all Ralph titles, even busier than TF2.
Which is cool. So moving on, a couple of days ago, the new greenlit batch of titles was announced, with 41-ish of the 75 titles showing signs of Linux support.
I think we need to focus on 75 titles. But yeah, 41 out of 75 is a massive amount of Linux games. And I'm really impressed that the numbers, getting nearer 100%.
Yeah. We're kind of well over half there, which is really nice. Is there anything from this list here that stands out to either of you guys?
I wanted to mention a few we've mentioned on the casts previously as being interesting, and we won't focus on them too much just because we have mentioned them. Boson X.
So, Runner.
Excellent visuals, really fast gameplay, should be good.
It's funny, kind of calling back to I said I've been playing a little bit of Flashback. Boson X reminds me heaps of the cutscenes there. Not of the game itself, because the visuals for Flashback are more painterly, but the cutscenes definitely.
Yeah, Glitch Space as well, I think we've mentioned, and when we had Muse on, we spoke about Tabletop Simulator as well, and I'm glad they've got through.
That's the only one I've heard about.
Yeah, and that's still got a campaign running on Kickstarter, I think.
Have they been fully funded, or...?
Successfully funded on March 14th, by the looks of things.
Nice.
I'd bolded a couple of the ones that I'd heard of before or had been following in some fashion. There's Bean Quest, which has been under zero for quite some time, which looks like a fun platformer, and it has a sequel on the way too, apparently. Classroom Aquatic, I had heard of. It's kind of... it looks silly. But it has Rift support, so it's something that I kind of have been paying attention to from that angle, and that was where I the reason I'd heard of Glitch Space before as well was Rift support in that. I hadn't heard of Proven Lands before, but that seems kind of interesting. It's this kind of sandboxy exploration, crafty, Starbound type thing, third person, and 3D. But yeah, it looks kind of interesting. And Strata, which is this puzzle game that kind of something about it kind of makes me think of Splice, I guess. Just really simple mechanics. You kind of weave coloured ribbons, I guess. I had been meaning to ask the devs if they were planning on doing a Linux release, and it seems, after looking at the comments on the greenlit thing, that they are. So that's sweet.
That does sound familiar. I wonder if we've mentioned that before.
I know I've had a tab with it open for months, with an item in my to-do list to say, contact these guys and see what the go is. But I'm glad that someone beat me to it.
Nice. So, let's talk about releases on Steam. Luftrausers, a game by Vlambeer.
Hooray! It looks like a game by Vlambeer.
Yes.
It looks fantastic.
The hype for this game, though, it generally looks brilliant. It's a 2D side-scrolling flying game.
Arcadey shoot 'em up with flying type mechanics. It looks like heaps of fun, and it's nowhere near realistic. It's all crazy.
And English people pronounce the game Luftrausers all the time, which is fantastic.
How do you pronounce it, DerRidda?
Luftrausers. But rousers is actually not a real word, so you get to pronounce that however you want.
I think Cheese is shocked into silence.
I think so. Maybe I've crashed his internet with my accent. Oh, come on.
No, I was just thinking about how, I don't love trousers. Pants-free day is always a good day for me.
Okay, other releases. We have Line, which is a really neat-looking puzzler.
Yeah, that does look kind of neat. It's another one of those kind of very Spartan, very simplistic puzzle games that looks like it's got the scope to ramp up and be something really, really challenging.
Yeah, I'm glad that after the amplification of Candy Crush Saga with realistic-looking vegetables and the rest, people have sort of revolted and gone back to very minimalist, clean games, and it's brilliant. Another game we mentioned on the last cast, Powder Puff Girls, has been released.
And that has 2 graphics modes or something. I know nothing about Powerpuff Girls.
Neither did we when we discussed it, but we spoke about the fact it's got sort of the not retro mode, but the original mode, or however you want to call it.
Yeah, there's 2 art styles. Basically, the original art style from the late 90s series, and there's now a remake series that has a new art style, and that's in there as well.
Man, things from the 90s are already getting remakes. This is mad.
It makes you feel real old, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know.
I'm waiting for Rocksteady to make a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game.
I see what you did there. I don't know. I don't even know what Rocksteady make.
They made the Batman games, the recent ones.
The good ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't played them.
Sorry, they're a British development studio. Yeah.
Oh, they're cool then.
Totally. Running with Rifles. I like the look of this. It looks like a sort of a more campaign-y based cannon fodder sort of game.
Yeah, that has been out for ages though on other services, and it's a bit sad. It seems like nobody has heard of that game before, and now it comes on Steam, and it's now it has a chance to earn money.
Science Girls has been released by the looks of things, which we didn't have on our list.
Yes, indeed. That is one that looks like a Renpai game. It has anime style in it, and it doesn't look like it's about science girls, as in, yay girls, go do some science, but more about, look, here are girls in skimpy skirts that do science. Enjoy!
Is it a bit dictatorial to say, I never want to mention Renpai games on this cast, because I think they're terrible?
Maybe a little bit.
For the exploitative appearance of the characters, that's all.
Yeah, well, you see, that's just it. It's not all Renpai games are like that. And one of the greenlight titles, which I think we may have skimmed over. No, it's not a greenlight title. It's something else that I came across, which I don't recall the name of right now, but I will remember. Is a point-and-click adventure game done in Ren'Py.
Oh god.
Which has like pixel art styles and stuff, and doesn't play like a Ren'Py game.
Don't blame the engine for what people do with it.
Right.
Okay. So basically, if there are any screenshots with girls that look like they want to take their clothes off, nope.
Yeah. I hadn't actually looked at what it was. I just went, oh, here's a title that wasn't there yesterday.
Well, we discussed on the last cast a rather dodgy-looking thing, and the Kickstarter thank you message was basically all the girls just in bikinis. I was like, oh god.
Sad.
Yes.
But we also have Influent bolded here,
I have not heard of
which
that.
I haven't heard of.
Did you bold that, DerRidda?
Yeah, I bolted that because that's actually quite interesting. It's learning gamified. It's basically a vocabulary learning game that came out on Steam, and it's for Linux, and it doesn't do much, but it pretty much gives you a vocabulary of like 300 words where you can learn how to write and pronounce it inside a gaming environment. And it already has quite a number of languages available. So if you are interested in maybe learning some Japanese or German or Bulgarian or a couple other languages, it will not teach that language to you in the whole, but it might be good to get a basic vocabulary going.
Oh wow.
So what type of gamey thing, what type of environment does it present for that learning?
It looks like pretty much a basic house or flat or whatever, and you just go around looking at objects, and you then get presented the translation for that. It seems like it.
Okay.
I wonder if Typing of the Dead could have a mod for that. Because that would be...
That can be a bit hard when you
Yeah.
suddenly type Chinese or Japanese or...
Oh, you'd learn quickly.
Typing Japanese
yeah.
is mad.
Oh yes, I see. I was just going to say the surprising thing about this is all the languages they're not downloadable content. They are unique applications, so...
Yes, but you buy it a bit strange. At first you buy a unique application that is the first language you're going to buy.
And then you can buy... It's a bit... It's
then you
odd.
buy DLC that's all the other languages. So
Yeah.
you start out with whatever you want and just add on top what you want.
It's an interesting way of selling it. But yeah, kind of neat.
And there's also this Geekbench application,
Yeah.
which we're all excited about, but don't really know much about, I imagine. It's interesting to see which bits of software are arriving on Linux at this fairly early stage.
Now, do we know if this actually gives output in Bogomips at all? Because, I mean, that's the only number that Linux people care about. Bogomips.
We don't need anything but GLX gears.
Exactly.
That's right.
I don't know, it doesn't look like it's much of a, it's a benchmarking tool. If you have use for that, then go ahead and buy it. Tell us what it's like.
It's $15.
Yeah, it's even got Steam achievements.
It's just what you want from a benchmarking app. So for anybody not looking at this who's interested, it doesn't look like a 3D benchmarking program. It looks more like a hardware profiling
Yeah, it just ranks
thing
you
in general. Yeah.
It's got sort of leaderboards.
Leaderboards.
I think when I was looking at the achievements, I can't bring them up right now. It had something like you're in the top 1% of Steam users or something. As in, it will profile your hardware, and then basically you'll never be able to get some of the achievements in it.
So, GOG.
GOG!
Hooray!
Is that better?
Interesting. What's GOG?
It used to be called Good Old Games, but now they're selling new games as well, and their policy is to pretty much have one price across the board, or for all regions, and no DRM. And they actually put some additional support in these old titles, so you are not on your own in getting them to run.
They also have a refund guarantee.
Yeah, that too.
They also take time and put a little bit of effort into finding some meaningful extras, and they hug kittens.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So GOG have announced support for Linux with at least 100 launch titles.
Yes.
Yes, but some people already hate on them because they have announced that they will at first only be supporting Ubuntu and Mint.
People.
And we have no
Yes.
idea what kind of packaging approach they're intending to use at this point.
I hope they do generic installers, and I can understand if they only support what is pretty much only Ubuntu, if we are honest about it, because Mint is Ubuntu.
Yeah. I think, honestly, if we don't know anything, we shouldn't be too critical. Because, they're like, hey guys, we want to come to your platform, and everyone's like, boo, hiss. It may be that they're using Steam Runtime. It may be that, their installer's just a zip of all the files there. We don't know yet. So it may be because they were looking for a Qt engineer that they've got a client for GOG on Linux.
Maybe. I know that for Windows, they put together their own installers for everything. It's interesting to see the amount of work that GOG as a company puts into packaging and distribution compared to other game stores where the developer handles most of that. So I think Gamerlith is the only one that I'm aware of that puts any kind of level of effort into to that sort of stuff. But it is really, really exciting stuff. I mean, Linux has been sort of the most requested thing on their feature request system for ages.
And if you remember just what excuses they used to say we are not supporting Linux, like we have to support every distro and we have to support Raspberry Pi, which was absolute nonsense. This came a bit as a surprise.
Yeah, I think their public opinion might possibly have not met their private one, and it may be that because for the past couple of months everyone's been getting grumpy at them about Linux support now that Steam's had it, and they've been obviously steadfast in saying it's not coming until this announcement. With the other bit of news we wanted to talk about, Witcher 2 has finally had a Linux beta retail sub on Steam arrive, so it looks like they're working on that. And clearly they've been working on this in the background, so...
Yes, which is not surprising, because if people don't know, GOG is made by CD Projekt, and CD Projekt Red has developed The Witcher. So it's kind of like Valve coming to Linux. It would have been not that convincing if they didn't bring their own titles. So
Yeah.
CD Projekt does the same. They bring GOG, their publishing platform, to Linux, and they bring their premier title to Linux, which is awesome, because I love that game.
I did wonder what the connection there was. I thought John just went, right, we'll stop talking about GOG, we're moving on to Witcher 2. That's alright.
That's why I said
that's good.
That's why I kept them together in the notes, you see, so yeah.
Yeah.
It was all
I
planned.
had no idea.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no idea at all.
And
that's great to hear.
Their next game, their steampunky, whatever it is.
Cyberpunk 2033, I think.
It's called Cyberpunk 2033?
Might signify some good things for that.
2077.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow, that's okay.
It's got a woman kneeling down with metal bits poking out of her arms.
It's got a woman.
Yeah, she's in skimpy attire.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
But one thing to note about these 100 launch titles is GOG have mentioned that most of that's probably going to comprise of titles with existing Linux support. So hopefully if you own games on GOG and run them under Wine or something, hopefully you'll get some native titles out of that. But they're also hoping to, afterward, put some effort into getting a lot of the older games packaged for Linux. So we can speculate that that's probably going to happen via native DOSBox and via ScumVM, which they already use for many of the titles that they distribute.
And let's just face it, and let's get that out of the way. I would bet there will probably be some Wine involved sometimes, which for old games we really shouldn't be too grumpy about. Games that have no support anymore on either platform, if they wrap them in Wine and if they support it and say, we figure out it works for you, then I don't think we should be as dismissive of it as we would be for new titles on Steam or wherever.
Definitely.
Yes.
But that is massively exciting. I am totally pumped.
Yeah. We are incredibly excited. Do we know if many of the Mac titles that are on GOG are wine bottled at all?
I
have
only
no
know
idea.
that for a fact about, I think if System Shock 2 is also on GOG, it's Rhine Red, because we have talked about that. The source code is gone, and they pretty much can't do it any other way. And there's also The Witcher 1, which was used a licensed BioWare engine, and there the Mac version is also Rhine wrapped. So at least two titles I can think about are in Rhine.
Wasn't The Witcher 1 one of the first wine-wrapped games on Steam for Mac?
Could be.
I have no idea.
I think it was. I remember paying attention to it.
Yeah, but no fear about The Witcher 2. They have their own engine for The Witcher 2. They own that thing. They can port it to everything they want to. So that will not be a wine port.
Yep.
Fantastic. And to close off that, I might just finish by saying, so, GOG.
Yay!
Yay!
Woo!
Maybe a moment's silence for the Windows-only GOG of the past.
No silence. Let's move on.
Gauntlet.
Yay! And that's
Yay!
genuine. I love the original. Not even the original Gauntlet. I have Gauntlet 2 here, original on NES, and I love that game. Even my nephew loves that game, even though it's several times older than he is.
What do you guys think? Does this 3D reimagining of Gauntlet, does it look and feel like Gauntlet from the trailer?
From the trailer, it kinda does, but that game is so old you can't just translate it anymore. You have to give it a new look. I mean, it was more like form follows function back in the day, and it didn't even look like dungeons, to be honest. You had some colored walls and some sprites coming at you. So, yeah.
But yeah, it looks pretty exciting. Not a lot of information on the official website at the moment.
Can
yeah.
I interject? I have never played Gauntlet. Can you describe the game, please?
Kill zombies and monsters and things.
Yeah, it's a cooperative dungeon crawler, and you go through randomly generated levels and kill monsters from monster spawners, find keys, find treasure, find food that should heal you but accidentally shoot the food and be angry at your friends for doing that or whatever.
It's like Hammerwatch if you want to get into some kind of cyclic reference.
Yes, and pretty much Diablo's granddaddy, if you want to think about it that way. There is no loot, though.
It's pretty bad. I've got Hammerwatch. I just haven't got around to play it yet.
You should. It's fun, but you will die a lot.
I die a lot in everything.
Yeah, Hammerwatch is intentionally referencing Gauntlet.
Ah, I see. But yes, this Gauntlet remake is being done by Arrowhead, who are the developers of Magicka, which is quite interesting. If that's telling at all.
That tells us they know their cooperative clusterfuffs, so that should be good.
Clusterfuff. Sorry, I'm giggling.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to be able to make Arse Mines on Linux.
Yep. And moving on again.
We explained this in the previous cast. Magic is a corded spell game. So you sort of put in different elements with different letters on your keyboard. And you also sort of make them explosive. And yeah, so an arse mine actually makes a cluster of bombs that go off all around you.
Yes, and you detonate your friends, because that's how Magicka works, or Magicka. But yeah.
So I don't recall if we've mentioned them previously on a cast. I know I've been personally keeping an eye on them, but Campo Santo, new indie development studio, which has people from Telltale Games, people from Double Fine, and other noteworthy studios, have just announced the title and theme setting for their first game, which is going to be called Firewatch, and will support Linux.
Well, this page doesn't tell me anything about the game, to be honest.
It does say very little, but for the developers on Twitter that have been chatting about it, it does sound like it's going to be very good. And the art style of the website tells you that they've really worked hard on it.
Yeah. So the idea is that you play somebody in like a, I don't know, what are these things called in North America? They're like forests or something. And your job is to just kind of look over the forest and make sure that you sit in a watchtower and make sure that everything's fine, like a reserve or national park, we'd call them here. But you really don't have any contact with humans outside, aside from you've got a walkie-talkie and you talk to your your supervisor or fellow ranger or whatever. And the idea is that they want to create something where you make choices and decisions that directly impact on this kind of one meaningful relationship that you've got. So if you want to think along the lines of say, The Walking Dead or something, if you've played that, but perhaps a little bit more narrowly focused on these two people.
Can I let the whole first burn down if I want to? Burn down? Like, all of it?
Well, I
Maybe
hope
even
so.
start a fire and make myself more important?
I don't know if there will be a fire. I think that's more about your job.
Well, there pretty much has to be. I mean, it's called Firewatch. I mean,
I don't know.
it's going to be pretty disappointing if there's just a big flood.
I don't know that it will necessarily be natural disaster related either. I think Firewatch is more a reference to the role, the job that your person has. Yeah. But I don't know. There's something about it, and this is nothing but speculation, but there's something about it that makes me wonder whether or not it's going to have some supernatural vibes.
Well, we're going to have to see, because they've barely said anything, and it might even be a year or two out. So.
Yeah, and it could be some time out, but definitely I'm going to be continuing to keep an eye on their stuff.
Right, so the whole of this week, GDC has been running.
And what a bomb it dropped on us.
Yeah, there's been some exciting stuff.
Yeah, so... No, wait.
Do it!
So, yes, OpenGL.
Yay!
Well, there has been a talk made or held by representatives from NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel about reducing the driver overhead to nearly zero, which should be interesting for developers. And kind of, let's just say, even if you just add the DirectX 12 news, Mantle seems to be a bit dead in the water now.
It's a bit more complicated.
Explain.
This whole GDC has been about announcing competing APIs for graphics rendering. So Microsoft finally noticed that people are sort of wanting to shift off DirectX. So they've come out and said, hey, we're making DirectX 12, but it's not going to come out till next year sometime.
And you will probably at least need Windows 8 for that. So it's dead in the water already.
Pretty much. The features they've mentioned that are going to be in it sound like they're basically just copying Mantle one for one. Mantle seems to be getting some support from game engines, because CryEngine has just announced that it's getting Mantle support as well. So it sounds like developers short term are going to move to Mantle on Windows, because DirectX isn't going to get here in time. And all the other platforms are moving to OpenGL, and all the OpenGL guys are looking at optimizing their APIs as well, which is what this talk covers.
I won't be moving to Mantle on Windows if Mantle stays render specific, so they can at best edit. So they have to go to DirectX 12 or OpenGL even on Windows.
Unless, of course, AMD get ahead of the charge, and you see more AMD cards getting sold on Windows in the next year or two, because of course the consoles have the same chipsets. So developers are going to be targeting that graphics core next GCN architecture. So it's it's sort of all change, and yet everything's going to stay the same for quite a while. It's definitely interesting.
The thing I really like about this particular piece of news is that we've got NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel sitting down together to send a positive message about OpenGL. This is pretty exciting.
Yes, very good news. Especially since all the people doing the talk are OpenGL advocates. Some of them do research on graphics. Graham Sellers from AMD has been doing some work to actually reduce the amount of OpenGL API calls that are needed. So it sounds like they're going to be working on sort of OpenGL 5 stuff at the moment to trim some of the fat from GL. And maybe next GDC we might hear about a far reduced subset of GL being announced. Because OpenGL is very extension-based, it's likely that all the modifications they're discussing behind the scenes will come to drivers over the next year anyhow, before an official API gets announced, because that's honestly how they do it. They work on what extensions are supported in the driver, and then they support that in the engine. Right, so I mentioned something in that block that we want to mention now, CryEngine.
Yay!
Yay!
They've announced that their next version, or the new CryEngine, because they don't version number it, frustratingly, is going to be... No, it's just CryEngine. Sadly. Yeah, they're very happily. The new CryEngine is coming to Linux. Woo!
Let's just call it CryEngine 4.
Yeah, CryEngine something. Now, someone was hinting that it's actually using a DirectX 11 to GL translation layer rather than sort of natively supporting it, which might possibly lose its some performance compared to other engines.
I
don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I think there's so much more going on than just the renderer that may not end up being performance bottleneck. I don't know.
It doesn't seem to be the bottleneck on Source Engine, if we are honest about it.
No.
So, but also interesting in that news is that they are going to a subscription-based model. You can pretty much, for just a couple of dollars, license CryEngine monthly with no extra revenue share program, and
that is ridiculously cheap compared to expensive engines like Unity.
Unity is now an expensive engine, yes.
Yeah, that I never thought I would hear people say that. You know, that's the times are definitely changing. I haven't read the license to see what the terms are like so far as renewing your subscription and still continuing to make use of the engine. It'd be interesting to see what that is.
But that gives us a natural segue to this other massive bomb of news. Unreal Engine 4 is not.
Yay!
It's not only going to support Linux in deployment, but it's also going to support it in authoring. So they're going to bring their editing tools over to Linux. But not just that.
Apparently that's going to happen further down the track, I think.
Yes.
That was the impression I got from,
They intend to have these built in. There are bits of the Linux, not move, but support in the engine at the moment, and they're working on it sort of live, let's say. But the other big announcement is they're also going to a subscription model, which is, was it $20 a month and 5% revenue share?
Yeah, I think so.
Along those lines, yes.
And you get access to a closed GitHub repo, like full source access for that.
Yep, you get full source access. You get access to obviously file bugs and offer up patches, so you can do pull requests. And if you cancel your subscription, you still get, the snapshot of source that you've downloaded at that point.
But you're of course still obligated to pay the revenue share royalties.
So any release you put out, you'll still need to obviously pay them 5% of the gross, I think it is. But that basically means for $19, you get access to the whole of Unreal Engine 4 without support. But wow, I mean, yeah, compared to something like Unity,
that's excessively cheap.
And isn't that so that because of GitHub they will probably also be accepting upstream contributions?
I really hope so.
Well, apparently they already do share developers' branches, or encourage the sharing or something. I haven't really managed to get into the Unreal development community stuff. I find it very difficult to be motivated about Epic-related stuff.
I know they've always been a bit prickly, but I think some of that is middleware issues more than anything else.
Oh, for sure. Well, for me, the thing that really irks me is not necessarily that there have been problems in the past, but that they have not been willing to communicate with the community about it.
Yes, very much so.
And I am a little bit disappointed to see the cheering and dancing in the streets regarding this, when we still have not yet had any kind of public acknowledgement of the unfulfilled promises of UT3 and Unreal 3 engine support. I mean, to me, I look at it and it's kind of like, he hits me, but it's okay because it gives me chocolates and flowers.
Oh,
yeah, but he's giving us chocolates and flowers many years after he hit us.
That is not exactly true. Let's stress that metaphor.
I don't want to be grossly negative.
I don't want to be negative either.
Behind the scenes.
It doesn't matter what happened behind the scenes, though. They can still say, hey, look, this stuff didn't happen. We're really sad about it. Here's Unreal Engine 4.
What's the problem there?
Yeah.
Nothing. No problem. They just haven't said anything.
And to be fair, we are pretty much just in the second age of Linux gaming, the one where it's actually going to work. And let's just say, what happened back then is not in the mind of many people that have just come to Linux for gaming, because it's really a long time ago, and times were different back then.
Yeah.
That's no reason to not say, we're sorry that things didn't work out last time.
Well, how about we talk to someone at Epic, see if we can get them on the podcast, and at least see if they could possibly say, bug it up, and let's move on.
That would be sweet.
And then we invite Santa Claus and he will give us all the Linux ports we ever want.
Yeah, if someone can wrangle that, that'd be great. I've been trying to get some kind of comment on them from them about stuff. I mean, the closest thing that we have to a official announcement of the cancellation of UE3 for Linux or UT3 for Linux was that offhand remark that's in a Phoronix news article, and it's kind of sad that stuff is communicated that way instead of directly from the company.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a time when demand was far lower. Being able to ship stuff was far more awkward. And what if it had just been...
Oh, look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing that it didn't happen. It's a bad thing that they didn't stand up and say it's not happening. And they let the person doing the port take the brunt of the community outrage at what was going on, which is a horrendously poor way to treat a contractor. I'd fire them out of a cannon into the sun for that.
No, I completely sympathise from that. But maybe the community shouldn't be so mad at that contractor either. Because if it is completely out of their hands...
Oh no, it should always be. Even if it is their fault, they're not necessarily they're not the ones who should be accountable. It's if you hire somebody, that's you. The buck has to stop with you. It's between you and the contractor to sort out what's going on. The customer should never really deal directly with the contractor because they don't represent your company. But yeah, if we can get someone from Epic on the cast, that'd be fantastic.
Right, so along with the GDC news this week, Develop Online did an interview with quite a few Linux developers to discuss about, is Linux going to be right for gaming development? And I wanted to share this link to you guys because it's quite an interesting little write-up.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting faces there in that interview.
Some I hadn't heard of before.
Yes.
I'm sorry, DerRidda.
No, actually...
It was a hanging yes, was it?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment about something that made me sad, and because the first comment on that page I read was about one of the developers there, who is a woman, and it was not nice. And why didn't people discuss the topic first?
The internet scum.
That was quite disappointing.
Back on topic. Josh Clint really likes shiting on Windows these days, which I find kind of awesome.
It's endearing, isn't it?
Maybe that's probably something we should have mentioned while we're talking about these other engines. How do we think LEDWorks stands up?
LEDWorks stands up in that regard that for the indie license you really just pay flat your $100 and you get the engine, and that entitles you to the updates in that version number, and you pay nothing beyond that. And I don't know if he is... I have no contact with that guy, really, and I don't know if he's regarding any changes, but it's still a different proposition if you say, here's your indie license, you don't get the source, but you probably won't need it, because that's like a very small team, very indie-focused license, still cheaper than having Unity for a few months, and no royalty strings attached.
It is nice to have that kind of commitment-free thing going on, where you just you do your stuff and that's it.
I mean, looking at on a scale of things now, if you want an engine that you want support with, you've got 3 top-notch ones that are pretty cheap. Unity's fairly expensive. Source, I don't even know if they're still licensing that out.
The landscape is definitely shifting.
A monumental shift. What's going to be interesting is what's going to happen with all these Unity devs once they've released... all these indie devs that are using Unity once they've released their first, their next game. Are they going to all switch to Unreal because it's going to be far cheaper? Or, or maybe they're worried that 5% is a bit too much. I don't know how much Unity takes. I mean, we probably don't know.
I think Unity breeds a certain kind of loyalty towards itself because it has this asset store and really good documentation and tutorials. And in some respect, I don't want to dismiss developers using Unity, but there's a certain breed of indie developer who have learned to use Unity and not learned to make a game in general. They have learned these tools and they will stick to them. Not that I want to dismiss these people, they should stick to what they like, but I think there is a loyalty here because people are used to it. It's basically the Photoshop of the indie dev.
As far as I'm aware, Unreal comes with a couple of features that might help them. Blueprint, which is sort of a, like Unity's plug and, drag and drop sort of interface. And it also supports JavaScript and C# as languages for. So, I mean, they'll be well supported if they wanted to leave it. Just
there are also developers who have been, like UDK dependent in that same respect, where they've had, experience there that's not so transferable. So, Unity isn't necessarily providing anything new in that respect.
There have been some really interesting VR announcements this week.
Oculus have announced their second Rift dev kit, which has a whole bunch of big changes which have been migrated across from the Crystal Cove prototype, which people may have previously heard of. They've got a 75Hz low persistence pentile arranged OLED display, which means that instead of being in a square type grid, there's a kind of, I don't really know how to describe pentile arrangement, but basically it means that you're not really going to end up with the screen door effect in the same way that it previously was. You're not going to have the same kind of consistent straight lines that were visible before. But they're also bumping up the resolution to 1920 by 1080, which is going to have a big impact on that as well. And they're blanking out between frames as much as they can, which apparently reduces significantly the amount of blurring and juddering that you see with the Mark 1 dev kit. So that's kind of pretty impressive. The FOV has been increased a little bit, which is good as well.
What was in the DK1? Was that 90 for an FOV?
1280 by 800. Oh, no, FOV. Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head.
No, that's okay.
But I think it might have been 100.
Okay. But I mean, it sounds like the best changes are the low persistence and the far better tracking. Because
well, beyond that, they're also bringing positional tracking into the play as well. So that's exciting too.
It's got infrared lights on it, and it's also got a camera that basically does positional tracking.
Yeah, so if anybody had seen the Crystal Cove prototype, that had IR LEDs visible on the surface. They've actually sunk those into the chassis, and they're not visible anymore. It kind of the chassis itself is IR transparent, so they're able to have something that looks a little bit smoother, but still gives the same thing. And there was a demo that I saw people playing at GDC where it was this kind of a static camera brawler type thing, where there were two sort of fantasy characters attacking each other with swords, but it took place on a tabletop.
Yeah, I saw that one as well. It looks kind
of... and that it used a positional head tracking because sitting around the table that these characters were fighting on were avatars that represented the players, and it was using the positional head tracking to show where they were looking and what they were doing and stuff, and it looked super uncanny valley. But yeah, they've also been making big software changes. Apparently, there's been as much changed on the software side as the hardware side, which is part of the lower latency, head tracking stuff as well. And they're hoping to continue to bring software changes down the pipe, as they approach the consumer release. So, for people who are following that, that's pretty exciting stuff.
You can also order that on their website for $350.
Oh yeah,
which is surprisingly low. I honestly thought that would be a little more expensive. So yeah, wow.
So it's slightly above what I paid for my dev kit. I think they stuck with the $300 price tag after the crowdfunding campaign for the dev kit one. But yeah, to see it at a similar sort of price with these extra features is fantastic.
So have you ordered one?
I'm looking at my finances right now. But if I had the money, I would definitely be getting a second one. I had planned to get 2 DK ones, but I thought I'd hold off for the second one so that I could have a look at the newer hardware and stuff. But I'm definitely interested in having a couple of dev kits so that I can start playing around with looking at developing some multiplayer stuff.
Yeah,
I want one.
I also want one. I'm in frustratingly similar position. It's like want one, shouldn't really buy one. So yeah.
Yeah, and a reminder that Oculus are recommending that consumers hold off on and wait for the consumer version, because this is still subject to change and still has a couple of rough edges. It's still much heavier than they'd like. Apparently, they've got internal prototypes that demonstrate that they can get it much lighter. But this DK2 is heavier than DK1. Not that like DK1 was still the lightest HMD I've ever put on my head. So but they want to go lighter again, which is definitely going to make a difference.
Don't know if I heard you mention it, but they've also removed the back box that was at the back of the strap as well, I think. And they've added on a USB port on the actual headset, so maybe you can chain in some headphones or some additional sensors.
Right, yeah. The breakout box, which wasn't really attached to the device except via this not long enough cable. So it was like, it's meant to sit on the desk, but for me, I have difficult. I'm always pulling mine off the desk, always. But yeah, it's power over USB now, which means that you don't have power cable to worry about anymore. They said they've dropped it back just so that it's only got HDMI and USB there, so that's one less
power,
on this cable. Well, and input. So the head tracking stuff goes back via USB. Exciting. Yeah, and they've kind of. I think it's got a longer cable on it too now, which makes a big difference. Because people do want to, Oculus are targeting a sitting down type experience, but people do want to be able to move around a bit more than the DK1 allowed. The cable is now running back over the back of the head strap rather than just hanging out the side. And yeah, as you mentioned, they also put a USB port. They put it like a USB hub into the HMD itself. And while that's not powered, they've provided the ability to give extra power if you do want to run powered devices there. So that's kind of neat.
I also wanted to mention that Sony this week also surprisingly announced they're also making a VR headset.
Was that a surprise? I thought we knew that something was likely to come.
Yeah.
Everyone's been talking about they're probably doing it, but it sounded like the sort of Apple's making a smartwatch sort of rumor that hangs around because other people are doing it, and you think, well, Sony's probably likely to. And it does sound like they've been working on this pretty much in parallel with Oculus. I mean, I was getting a bit frustrated on Twitter about it, but Carmack tweeted that said when Palmer came to him, he recommended to Sony to hire him because they do really good hardware research at Sony.
So do we have any specs on the Sony device at this point?
They've put out some specs, though there's not much. They have said it's similar to the Rift DK2, so it's a 1080p screen. It's got a slightly narrower FOV, so it's only 90. But it's got latency tracking and position tracking using the PlayStation Eye as well, or whatever they call that now, PlayStation 4 camera or something.
I've read a bit of a comparison about it on a German tech site, and seems like the positional tracking is really about the best thing about that device, and the wearing comfort, because the LED screen they've used it still has all these smearing and blurring problems when turning around. It's only at 60 Hz, and let's just say they are on the display side, they are behind Oculus still a good bit.
I can imagine that. They've said it's probably going to be at least another year before they come out. So it may be that whatever, Sony might just order the screens that Oculus is using or something,
Yeah, but they have really praised the motion tracking, because you get the eye tracking your head and you already have the move system, so you really have a good VR motion control setup there that already works and is going to be available on every console they are selling it to.
Yeah.
But then again, it's probably going to target their consoles. That means there's not a snowball chance in hell that they are going to target any higher resolution than 1080p at 60 Hz and going to be able to deliver that on that hardware.
There's talk about 60 Hz just not really being enough for a consumer-grade experience. And Oculus are talking about how 75 isn't enough for them. They want to get up. And I think Abrash had been talking about 90 Hz as being this kind of thing that people should be aiming for.
I'm also obviously worried that it isn't going to be good enough. But for a device that can plug into a console that, people are already buying and the rest, it's going to be still a decent VR compared to every single thing that's come before it.
Well, this is it, like you guys are like, well, it's only 90 degrees FOV. I mean,
I know.
I used
It's
HMDs
ridiculous.
in the 90s, and it's
We're
just
spoiled, aren't we?
yeah, it's mad that we are we've got this stuff available to us. It doesn't have to be
No, I know. It's
everything to start with,
the problem. I think is it's sort of the similar PC compared to console comparison. Oculus is obviously shooting as high as they can go to get their first consumer ready device. So they're obviously going to be working, and they've said that they're going to support anything that can plug into it and support whatever they want produced to it. I doubt my graphics card will be able to produce enough reasonable output for a Rift, for the released version at least. But we do know that the PlayStation 4's, it can do Trine 2 in 1080p stereoscopic. So that's doing 120 Hz in 1080p. So it's not as if the hardware cannot produce that output. It's more that obviously most games, something like Battlefield 4, they are really pushing as much into the frame that they can, and that obviously reduces their frame rate.
So is Sony using the same kind of lens approach as Oculus are for their HMD?
They really haven't said much. For the PlayStation 3, with their tracking, the Move has a glowing ball on it, and the cameras use that. But for the PlayStation 4 camera, they've got an infrared sensor as well. So it would not surprise me at all that the headset could also have infrared in it. As you remember at the Steam Dev Days demo, they had a headset there that Oculus actually helped them set up. Tom Forsyth was tweeting about it. And they put those marker codes around the room. Now, of course, if Oculus separately have come to the conclusion that having a static camera sense the headset, and Sony has as well, it's really interesting how both of them are converging to a similar point, at least.
I think that the static camera is definitely a very obvious first port of call. It's
Exactly,
an easier solution.
The problem that you've always got with position tracking is that you get drift, and they've got the camera there to make sure that their sensors aren't as millimeter accurate as they want them to be. So the camera does the additional work of stabilizing that.
I think they're talking about sub-millimeter accuracy for DK2.
Yeah,
but I don't know whether that's a result of having the camera available, or whether it's improvements in the actual.
I would think it's both.
Tracking that they've got, yeah.
With the Move controller, you get really fine twisting motion and sort of swiping motion, but forwards and backwards sort of into the screen, it's pretty poor, which is why they've obviously got that orb. So the actual orb senses the depth away from the camera. I'm ridiculously excited about the VR future coming up, because you've got two companies that really know what they're doing, throwing everything at it. You've got a bunch of different sort of PC hardware partners looking at input, as well as Sony. I'm just generally really, really excited about VR at the moment.
Good thing Microsoft is nowhere near it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with Sony is they've obviously come out and said they're really looking at the audio side of it. And if people doubt that, Killzone and Infamous have probably got the best audio out of any of the current games on the market. Battlefield 4 is pretty good, but both of those other games are doing raycasting for audio there. They're doing touch surfaces, so different materials landing on each other produce different audio. It's ridiculous the amount of work that they're getting these machines to do, and all of that R&D going together in VR is going to be a brilliantly realistic experience. I should stop gushing.
I do feel that we're going to end up with a transitionary period where VR is hot and everyone wants to get their crap supporting VR when it's not necessarily appropriate. I think we're going to see a lot of games that are not really that good in VR. Not just because it's new and people are learning how to use it, but just because people want to get onto the money train, I'm mostly interested in the sorts of stuff that we haven't seen yet.
Can you remember the point where adventure games were, static 2D and simple? And then we had the 3D...
I remember when they were text.
Well, yeah, I played Adventure when it was text. I'm just trying to set the scene here. And then we had Quake turn up. And a couple of years after that, everyone went into this 3D adventure game world. So you had Broken Sword do it, and it was terrible. Simon the Sorcerer did it, and it was terrible. Earlier than that, we sort of had Normality and these other games, and first person and
right.
These adventure games are no longer sort of enjoyable because the mechanics of moving around in that space they hadn't really perfected. And we're going to get the same for the early VR games. At least now that we've got indie devs that can sort of iterate more quickly, where you've got for the awesome, they've really nailed that game,
Right.
even before a retail release piece of hardware's out.
Have you had a chance to play that with a HMD?
I don't. The thing is, I have so few friends that are into any gaming, and even fewer interested in any sort of hardware stuff. That it would literally only be me, and I can't justify buying a piece of hardware that's going to sit on the shelf most of the time.
Yeah. I feel that for the Awesome is a really good match for this kind of early thing, but something that kind of strikes me as being different about the climate of games and game development now versus back when that really early transitionary 3D period is that gamers are more discerning and more selective about what they throw their money at, and the industry as a whole is a little bit more picky about what it's willing to acknowledge and celebrate. I think that it was a more forgiving time back then. So I don't know how things are going to turn out in the short term for a lot of existing types of games moving to VR. I think cockpit sims are probably going to be the obvious one that feels the best as far as stuff that we've got out there at the moment goes. But I don't really feel like first person shooters, as we currently know them, are really going to be all that interesting.
I've got a really neat idea for a sort of a VR experience that I'd like to have a look at doing, but I'm not a competent artist or scripter or anything, so
Well, I know an artist.
Are they good at making cars?
Happy to have a try. We'll see what we can come up with. We should bump heads sometime.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I got my dev kit because I wanted to look at using the head tracking and stuff as an expressive kind of input to allow players to try and emote through head tracking, because we do use movement excuse me, quite a lot to communicate those sorts of bits and pieces. So that's the sort of stuff that I'm interested in playing with. This is kind of building experiences that connect or allow immersion through expressiveness, because I think that kind of immersion isn't a one-way thing. It's not something that you receive. The display aspect of things is only one half, Yeah.
You should make a game where you play a miner that walks to work and the other shift is coming at him and you nod to all the people you like, just a confirming friendly nod, like that, a game.
Yeah. That's
Ogre Welsh. Right, boy.
But yeah, that sort of stuff, DerRidda. Like there's potential for really interesting things if you have a little bit more than nodding. There's quite a bit that you can do even with just the rotational head tracking. There's potentially a decent spectrum of stuff that you can start to explore. But if you turn that expressiveness that you have into relationship building mechanics with in-game players or even in a multiplayer context, I find that really compelling. That's really interesting. Although I have to say the other thing that I'm kind of interested to try is things that make use of the Rift and a traditional display together. So an idea that I tossed around earlier was like a submarine simulator where you've got like traditional first-person controls to run around the inside of a submarine, and then if you want to get the periscope up, you put on the dev kit.
Yeah, but that's the thing people will slap you for, because you already expect people to have their head tracking device and you want them to not use it most of the game. People would hate you for that.
It sounds like Cheese is trying to get a job at Sony because they're constantly trying to bolt on their sort of extras as little in-game things.
I just think that there's stuff that isn't being done.
Oh yeah,
and stuff that isn't obvious. This is the kind of stuff that I want to explore and have a play with and get the feel for.
One thing I didn't mention in talking about the Sony one, they've got this breakout box that has a pass-through so that you can plug it into a normal TV. While one person was actually in VR in this sort of diving bell as it was going down into the ocean, person sat on the sofa who had a controller could control the turtle that was swimming around on the screen. So you can actually get other people watching sort of your viewpoint, but they've also got, they don't have an Oculus Rift distorted view. It's a, full screen 1080p picture. Having that sort of, tandem play maybe might be a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think so. And that comes back to some of those TV shows that we were talking about a while back. As well, where you've got people talking to players who are wearing a HMD and guiding them through stuff. Yeah, that's all really interesting things, and not something that you can have the same kind of experience with a traditional display. But I think that perhaps we have gone on a tangent.
Yes.
And
we
so
are.
maybe we should just say GDC and move on.
They had a GDC Awards, and I wanted to mention that Papers, Please, a Linux game, got...
Best game at making you feel awful.
Papers, Please got an award at GDC for being a Linux game.
Oh yeah, and they renamed it to Awards, Please.
Yes. And last week at the BAFTA Game Awards, which is a British event, they also got an award. So, yay, Papers, Please.
Woohoo! So, Papers, Please.
Let's talk about crowdfunding games. Chaos Reborn by Julian Gullop, the creator of the original XCOM, which is actually a remake of the original Chaos, which was an 8-bit looking sort of RPG. You seem to know a bit more about this. Cheers, do you know?
No, I don't. I just knew that it was a remake of...
I know nothing about Chaos.
Chaos. Yeah, I never played Chaos, so I don't feel like I've got a lot of perspective to draw upon here. It looks like a hex grid turn-based strategy. Yeah.
I also have no idea about the original or the new one.
Looks like an RPG, apparently. Quickly skimming through. Fantasy setting. Yeah. The previs on the stuff here is interesting too.
We just leave it to the listener to figure out if they like that one, because we don't need to sell something to people we know nothing about, to be honest. Yep. And it's not like we need any more hold-up in this cast.
Nope.
Yes. Yeah. We mentioned Sinister a couple of casts back, which was a keyboard, gamepad-y mouse replacement thing, or mouse-friendly gamepad replacement thing for your left hand, if you are left-handed, or your right hand.
The pluggable devicey thing.
Yeah. They announced within the last fortnight that they would be cancelling their project just after hitting their funding target due to supply issues of a particular component, which they haven't publicly identified yet. They said that they're intending to continue with the project and that it's not really a big setback, but it would put them behind on the deliverable dates for the pledge rewards, and they weren't comfortable with that, so they're going to go away and come back.
So they have panned that before they collected everybody's money?
Yeah.
I guess that's just the same thing to do then.
Yeah. It sounds like they're not in dire straits or anything. It's just that there's some particular component that they were expecting to have available that they would have needed to meet their their initial pledge rewards. So hopefully we'll hear from them again in the future.
We've mentioned a game quite a few times, Satellite Reign, which is a Syndicate Wars successor. They've put out their first gameplay video.
It feels more like a Syndicate successor. But yeah, Syndicate, exciting. Satellite Reign, even more exciting. I love that in the the developer update that this video was attached to, that they said that the video was originally meant to just talk about some of the cosmetic weather interaction, like agents' coats reacting to wind and stuff as cars went by, and weather effects happened and stuff. But then it grew into this much larger thing showing crowds and cover usage and the X-ray camera mode and some combat and stuff.
It looks really like the real deal. Really good. I'm interested.
I love that it's got the vibrancy of the color-wise. It feels like it's got the vibrancy of the original Syndicate to an extent, compared to Syndicate Wars, for example, which was grey. But yeah, I mean, I'm pumped for that game. You sound like you're pumped for it, John. Do you have any thoughts on it, DerRidda? The game itself?
Yeah, I have only dabbled in the Super Nintendo version of the original Syndicate, but I liked it back then, and I think if the reviews hold up to what people are expecting, I will definitely buy that when it's out. Last but not least, JMonkey Engine. You may know this engine as a Java engine built on LWJGL. If you know 1379 and 1389, those are two games made with that engine. And they are launching their own Summer of Code crowdfunding campaign, or better yet, are in the middle of it. They are already in Google Summer of Code, but they had plans to do their own Summer of Code, and now they're doing it and funding it. And the goal is pretty low. They will collect everything on Indiegogo they can get, and they will pretty much just make their own Summer of Code. You know what it is. They pay students to develop on that project, and I guess it's good to have some free engines around, as in free software, instead of all these proprietary, or next to all these proprietary ones. I mean, maybe one of these will eventually be good enough to really be a go-to place for many indies instead of just the odd one-off.
I've only had a small play with JMonkey Engine 3. The last 7-day FPS that I participated in, I was intending to use it, but I encountered some JDK incompatibilities and ended up bailing and migrating to something else in the short term. But I really like to revisit it and give it a bit of time that it deserves, because it does seem like an interesting piece of tech, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the 3079 and that other one aren't really the greatest games on earth, but you see they are feature complete, they are not light on the complexity side. You can do some pretty stuff with it if you have the artist to make the pretty stuff. And
right,
you can make
if you look at their show
stuff.
reel, you can see more inspiring stuff than you would see from the 3089 screenshots. Not dismissing the game at all, but yeah.
So, I guess that brings us to the end of our cast.
SteamLUG Cast.
It's over.
It's over! Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up, John?
This last fortnight has been really ridiculously busy. GDC has been really eventful. Linux games are definitely getting in the headlines. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll come back during the next cast. We'll come back and talk some more about GDC because there's still stuff that's yet to be announced. There's likely to be more stuff to talk about.
Yep.
Is GDC done on this Friday, or are they still on for the weekend?
They've still got basically another evening of talks to do at the moment that are happening right now. I don't know if there are any tomorrow. I think it's done, isn't it, on Saturday?
Yeah, I think so.
But obviously we're going to have all the presentation notes from this last week to look at and skim through and maybe bring up some interesting tidbits. And maybe Witcher 2 might be live. Maybe some other games might appear. We shall see.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for an enjoyable cast. Thanks to everybody for listening. It's been fun.
See ya.
Cheerio.
So, GOG.
Yes.
Should we have a party?
We should.
Hang on, wait a sec. This is really exciting news, and you came out with GOG.
Yes,
I was hoping for you guys to go, yay!
Okay, wait a sec. Let's.
I'll do it again.
Let's work out a transition from games to this.
So,
now.
GOG.
Okay. No.
Sorry, no, go
that's
ahead.
not good enough.
You son of a GOG.
Hooray!
Is that better?
Interesting. What's GOG?
Some
They also
meaningful
hug
extras.
kittens.
And let's
And they
make
have
sure
kittens.
that DerRidda can't talk.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry.
Let him talk.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Sorry, DerRidda. C hash has always been C hash. What are you on about?
It's awful. That's what it is. Jaws.
Yeah, I got your name wrong, and
You are a shark now.
Rah. I wish I had a good shark voice. But I don't. Hey kids, want to learn about the Oculus Rift DK2? That's the best I got.
Also, I need to slap the chat for a second. MIDI is not a sound format. MIDI is a digital communication protocol for musical instruments, and it pretty much just gives you a note and a pitch and some other values. And MIDI itself only becomes a sound format because you have a MIDI synthesizer on your computer operating system, which interprets these MIDI files.
this is not a pipe. I'll be right back. I need to go get my dinner. I'm starving.
I like the elephant.